Hi, folks. Welcome to Ideas on Fire's webinar, Rock Your First Semester of Grad School. I was excited to see several new folks register who maybe this is your first webinar, as well as some returning folks who are old hats at this. So welcome. My name is Cathy Hannabach of Ideas on Fire, as well as the founder and director of Grad School Rockstars, which is a mentorship community for interdisciplinary progressive graduate students. So the reason why we wanted to do this webinar today on this topic is, number one, timeliness. September is when you are kicking off that first semester of graduate school, but it's also when you might have some questions about how to set yourself up for a productive rest of the school year and a productive rest of your time in graduate school. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the differences or the changes that you're going to experience your first semester in graduate school, whether you are coming straight from undergrad or whether you took a break and did something else, had careers, etc. And then also offer some kind of concrete tips for how to set up the systems and networks and habits that will help you have a really great rest of your graduate school experience. Just a little bit of logistic announcements. If you see on the side of your screen, there's a chat box there. There's a chat room on the side of there. If you have a question or a comment during the webinar itself, you can just put that in there, and I'll be sure to get to it in the Q&A. And at the end, there will be time for Q&A. So if you have a particular question or want some more follow-up or want to discuss something a little bit further that I talk about or something I don't cover, we'll definitely have time at the end to do that. So I'm going to share my screen, take down the video. Hopefully this will work a little bit, and we can go ahead and get started. Okay. So what's on the agenda for today? I'm going to talk about a couple kind of main overarching topics, and then we can go into more depth about things in particular that you're intrigued by. So we're going to start off by talking about creating your plan. This is your plan for your first semester in graduate school, but it's also a chance for you to think about how you want to plan out the years you have ahead of you in your degree program. I'm also going to talk about building your community right off the bat, and the different kind of strategies and approaches that you can take to building the thing that will sustain you throughout your graduate school time and throughout the careers that you build for yourself. I'm also going to talk about how to manage all of the reading that you do in graduate school. Some of you might have already experienced this if you're your first or second or third week into the semester. Those of you who haven't started classes yet, you will experience this quite soon. Graduate school has a ton of reading, and I'm going to talk about how to manage all that reading so that you get the most you can out of it. I'm also going to talk about writing and the different kind of writing that graduate school entails versus the kind of writing that perhaps you've done so far in your career. I'm also going to talk about how to protect your most important asset, and then the different ways that you can approach your time in graduate school and the semester that you're kicking off that time with to set yourself up for success in the future. And finally, I'm going to round this out with some advice on how to get some more support so that you can indeed rock your first and several future years in graduate school. So let's start off talking about your plan. So one of the main differences between graduate school and your time as an undergraduate is the role of motivation and where motivation comes from. Now, for those of you who are just starting your first semester, this is something you're probably in the process of experiencing. For those of you who are attending this webinar on behalf of someone else or to learn something, perhaps to advise some of your students, or maybe you're a couple years into graduate school and you just wanted to kind of brush up on ways that you can approach graduate to help you have the best experience. You've probably experienced this as well. So largely in undergrad, most of the things that you do in your degree program are established for you, right? There are course requirements. You have to take these classes. You have to get this GPA in these classes. You have a certain number of electives or a certain number of requirements. Most of that comes down from other people. It's usually set at the department level, set at the university level, sometimes set at the school level, depends on your situation. But the point is, most things that you do in terms of requirements come from outside. Somebody else tells you what you need to be doing, right? The big difference between graduate school and undergrad is that that external motivation starts to shift pretty dramatically. So most of the things that you do in graduate school, you have to figure out what they are and how to complete them. Now, the reason for this is largely because graduate school gives you a chance to figure out what kind of scholar, what kind of person, what kind of intellectual in the world you want to be. And because those are so different for different people, your dissertation is not going to be the same as the next person's dissertation. The projects that you work on are not going to be the same projects as everybody else. And graduate school gives you the freedom and the space to figure those things out. That's great. It's really fun. And it gives you a lot of opportunity to figure out what you actually care about. But it can be a big shift from undergrad. So one of the big things that you'll notice is that most of the stuff that you're supposed to be doing in graduate school is not a requirement. So no external force or being or mentor or faculty member is going to tell you, here are the 10 things you should do this semester. It's up to you to figure those out. Yes, that can be frustrating, but I'm here to help you figure out some of those and set yourself up for success. Another big shift from undergrad to grad, again, regardless of whether you went straight through or you had a career before this, is the massively different kind of identity that you have when you're a graduate student versus when you're an undergrad. When you're an undergrad, your identity in that professional space, your professional identity in that context was as a student, right? The big change when you get to graduate school is that you are no longer merely or even primarily a student. You are instead a colleague and a scholar. This is a big shift. It happens over time. It has ups and downs, and it winds in weird directions and goes in different ways. But it is an identity shift in the sense that how you understand who and what you are and your relationship to the communities around you, that's the big identity shift that graduate school entails. So what do you do with that, right? If you need to figure out what you're supposed to be doing, because someone's probably going to lay it out for you, and you're in the midst of navigating this pretty significant identity shift, how do you figure out how to plan a semester that will give you the things that you need to set yourself up for future years? The primary way to start this is to figure out yourself. One way to start thinking about this is to start to identify the environments, the interactions, the topics, and the practices that give you energy. Maybe those are particular spaces. Maybe those are particular forms of conversation that you have with people. Maybe those include specific topics that you get really excited about talking about or thinking about, or particular practices, particular routines. Start to think about or start to notice when particular environments, interactions, topics, practices give you a jolt of energy. They might make you happy. They might make you energetic. They might make your brain work really, really in a really kind of excited manner. What kind of perks you up, right? Take note of those things. And then conversely, which of those things drain your energy? Which kind of bring you down? Which make you not interested? This will entail a lot of experimentation, right? But when you start to notice, for instance, the type of topics that you enjoy conversing about, whether that's talking in classes with your colleagues, whether that's talking with faculty about it, whether that's stuff you like to research and to learn about both on campus and off, take note of those things, because that's telling you something not just about, hey, this might be a potential dissertation topic 4 years down the line, although it might end up being there, that you never know. But it also starts to give you some clues into how you individually work, right? And these things can help you create a plan that will set yourself up for your first semester as well as for your future years. Once you've identified some of those environments, those interactions, those topics, and those practices that give you energy, and you've also identified the ones that tend to zap you of that kind of energy, you can start to build a plan for your semester and for future years that take those things into account. For example, let's say that you've noticed that you tend to feel really exhausted and just not so great when you are in large social situations. So those might include something like happy hours or receptions or contexts in which you're in large crowds of people. Maybe that kind of drains you of energy. If you start to notice that, you can identify interactions and contexts that allow you to kind of create environments that avoid that to a certain degree. Now, obviously, you can't avoid that entirely, but you can minimize those and you can stop going to stuff like that to the degree that you can, and instead replace them with interactions or environments or communities of people that give you that kind of energy. Okay. So speaking of community, one of the big shifts when you enter any new space, whether that's a new job, whether that's you move to a new town, whether that's you enter graduate school, which is itself entering a new job and often involves moving to a new town, one of the things that you often miss the most people miss the most from where they used to live or in their old spaces or communities is that sense of a network, that sense of a community, that sense of friends and colleagues and collaborators and comrades, people who have your back, people you know, who know you, and who you can do various things with, right? So when you're entering graduate school, one of the first things that you'll be doing is building that new community. And the easiest way, or one of the most easy to identify ways to do this, is to talk to everybody. Go to all the receptions, go to all the colloquia, go to the events that your department and other departments throw, particularly the first few months of the school year. Most departments have some version of this. Indeed, it's heavy on, campuses are heavy on events in September, October, November. Go to stuff. Even stuff that you're not quite sure if you'll enjoy. Even if you are more introverted and the social situations are a little more draining for you than they are for other people, find the ones that you can make it to and go, particularly in these early few months, because you're going to meet people there. You're going to meet faculty, you're going to meet friends, you're going to meet fellow students, you're going to meet staff. And these are the people that are going to start to become part of your professional network. That professional network that you build, that you actively have to put together, can provide you friends, obviously. It can provide you intellectual stimulation. These are the people that you get to debate fun stuff with. They'll provide publication opportunities, as well as kind of career or job opportunities. That community, that professional network provides support and collaboration, people to commiserate with on things, and to work with on particular projects. That community can offer role models for diverse careers. They can also offer job opportunities. And finally, that community, that professional network can offer fun, right? Graduate school and academia in general requires a lot of kind of intense networking with fellow academics, fellow folks on and off campus. And this is your opportunity to get that work started earlier in your career. Another way to start to build community in your first semester in graduate school is to join student organizations. Now, every campus is going to be a little bit different and organizes this a little bit differently. But chances are your school, whatever it might be, has several, if not many, student organizations. Join them. Go to meetings. Start to help them plan events. It's a great way, number one, to meet people, particularly since you just entered graduate school. You just entered this program. You get to meet people. But it also, student organizations are a really great opportunity to build your resume in the sense that it teaches you concrete skills. For instance, if you organize a conference with a student organization, that gives you a chance to develop concrete skills. It also helps you build, right? Student organizations, if you have a leadership role in them, that counts as academic service. And again, it also helps you meet people and build that network. I'm also going to encourage you to connect with a diverse range of people, especially in your first few years and semesters. Obviously, you're probably going to be spending some time with students, fellow students in your cohort. So these are people in your department who entered the same semester as you. So they might be in your department, they might be called first years, they might be called something else, but these are people who are your cohort, your fellow students at the same level of you in your department. These are definitely people that you should connect with. But also make sure to connect with people in other cohorts in your department. So these can be people who are in an earlier cohort than you or a later cohort than you. I'm also going to encourage you to connect with students in other departments. Academic departments aren't silos, right? They work with other departments. This helps build both interdisciplinary scholarship. It makes scholarship smarter, but it also helps the campus community hang together as an actual community. So connect with students in other departments. Connect with fellow graduate students in anthropology, in sociology, in cultural studies, in whatever other departments or programs your campus has. Connect with them. Oftentimes you'll wind up in courses with them, which is a great entry point into maybe asking people if they want to go get coffee or hanging out with them, learning a little bit more about what they do and what they're interested in. But make sure you connect with both people in your department, but also people across the campus. You're also going to be connecting with faculty both in your department, as well as faculty in other departments. Obviously, the kind of easiest way to do this is to take classes from them. A good chance to get to know faculty, both in your department as well as faculty in other departments. But also, I'm going to encourage you to go to office hours. Now, oftentimes at the undergraduate level, undergrads rarely take advantage of office hours, or if they do, it's usually for the answer to a specific kind of question, right? I have a question about this assignment. I'm going to go to office hours and get the answer so that I can complete the assignment. At the graduate school level, office hours are your opportunity to talk with, to get to know, and to get support from faculty. That is their sole purpose. That is why they set aside office hours, is to connect with students. Go to office hours. You don't have to have a concrete question. You don't have to be enrolled in their class to go to office hours. Graduate school is where you should be meeting, talking with, getting to know, and letting them get to know you, the various faculty that work across the campus. Also get to know the staff. This is often an underlooked population, or an overlooked population, sorry, an underappreciated population on the university campus. So these are your program administrators or program assistants, the people that actually run your department, not the chair, not the people who sit on hiring committees, but the people who run the day-to-day working of your department. This also includes staff who work in student services. So people who work in the tuition office, people who work in research centers, the directors or assistant directors or social media managers for the Humanities Center or something like that. This also includes deans and provosts, right? People who work in admin, as well as advisors of various sorts scattered across the campus. All of these people, staff members, these are the people who actually run the university. Make friends with them. It will benefit you down the line, and you'll also get a much broader understanding of how your university works as a whole, not just your individual department. And finally, get to know people, venues, and organizations in the city or town that your university is in. In other words, get off campus. You can join local organizations or groups. You can find meetups on various topics, and you can connect with people in your neighborhood. Sometimes graduate students have a tendency to stick to campus and to kind of never leave campus. I want to discourage you from doing that. the connections that you'll build with the actual community, the actual neighborhood that your school is in, will be enormously helpful and productive for you down the line. So get off campus. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is how to manage all of the reading that you'll be doing in graduate school. And you'll be doing a ton of it. It's fun. Ideally, this is why you wanted to go to graduate school, is to do a lot of reading and writing, right? To study a particular topic or to figure out a topic that you wanted to study in more depth. That requires a lot of reading. But there are ways that you can manage that and make it more useful for you across the years that you spend in graduate school. So what are you reading? Obviously, you're reading assigned course materials, right? Classes that you're enrolled in have texts on the syllabus. You have to buy or obtain those texts in some way, read them, take notes on them, be prepared to discuss them, and write things about them. This also includes texts in your fields. Now, if you're in your first semester of graduate school, you're probably still kind of figuring out what your fields are, which is perfectly fine. You got time. You're not at the dissertation level stage yet. But text in the fields that you are intrigued by. This obviously would be the fields that your department is actually in. So if you are in a communication PhD program, one of your fields is communication, right? If you are in a PhD program in women and gender studies, one of your field is women and gender studies. But you might also have fields that you are intrigued by or that overlap with your department field itself. So for instance, if you're in a women and gender studies PhD program, maybe you're particularly intrigued by feminist work on the body. So that would be body studies, or feminist body studies more specifically, would be another one of your fields. Or maybe you're interested in transnational feminism as a specific kind of or subset of the feminist scholarship that you're reading in your department. That would be one of your fields, right? You're also reading texts by colleagues and friends. As a graduate student, as a colleague, as a fellow scholar, right? Not just a student anymore. You're going to be surrounded by people who are actually writing, responsible for producing and publishing the stuff that you read as an undergrad. Indeed, that's why you're in graduate school, right? To write some of that stuff yourself. So you're going to be reading texts by your colleagues. You're going to be reading texts by your friends. You're going to be reading texts by your faculty members and dissertation directors. You're also going to be keeping up on industry news, right, about academia as a whole. There are a number of different resources for this. Two of the most, perhaps, I think, well-known, widely circulated publications about this include the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed. There are a bunch more. You can find them. These are the two kind of big ones. And you'll probably be reading stuff about changes to academia, about changes to pedagogy, about news that involves higher education. And that's a good chunk of your reading as well. And then finally, the stuff you read just for fun. You actually get to do that too. So this is obviously a lot of reading. But again, if you remember what I was mentioning earlier about how most of the stuff that you do in graduate school comes from you, comes from internal motivation rather than somebody sitting you down and saying you should do these things. Similarly, you're probably not going to have people who are going to sit you down and say, read these 10 things this week. In some contexts you will, like if you're in a course, it's on the syllabus, you have to read that book this week, obviously. And if, your faculty advisor tells you or suggests to you, maybe you should read this thing, you should go read that thing for sure. But you should also be reading other stuff. So how do you actually find that stuff to read, considering it's actually up to you to find it? A couple different ways you can go about this. A primary one that you probably learned as an undergraduate is to mine bibliographies. So if you are assigned a book in a seminar that you're taking in graduate school, check out the bibliography in that book. What texts in that bibliography are you intrigued by? What texts in that bibliography are in your fields or in fields you're intrigued by? Go track down those texts, read those, mine those bibliographies, read those, mine those bibliographies, and so on and so forth, right? This is how academic scholarship works. And those bibliographies at the end of academic texts, whether they're books or they're journal articles, that's your kind of starting point for finding other reading material. Academic publishers, as well as trade publishers, often have newsletters or websites or social media accounts where they announce new publications that they have coming out. This can include journal articles, this can include books, this can include digital humanities projects, etc. But publishers are a really great resource to find out new texts that are coming out. Your faculty often will recommend things to you, which you should probably read, but you can also ask them for recommendations, right? So for instance, let's say you're intrigued by a particular field of scholarship, but you haven't been able to find very much information about it, or you're curious if a particular book would be worth it for you to read, right, versus another book. Ask faculty members. This is something you can take to office hours, and it's actually a really great excuse to show up to office hours, because you can say, oh, I had a question about this book that is in your field. I know this is right up your alley. I know this is your area because I've researched what your area is. What do you think of this new text that just came out? Should I grab a copy and read it? Reading groups, journals, syllabi are also opportunities for you to find texts to read. Okay. So then how do you actually manage all of that? You're doing all this reading and you want it to be productive for your future years in graduate school and for the various careers that you might build after that. I encourage you to create a note-taking system and a citation management system right off the bat. These might change. That's normal. That's fine. You'll try out different tools and different systems. They'll morph and change over your years in graduate school. But starting this off early will be enormously helpful for you down the line. Your year 6 self will thank your year 1 self tremendously. So what goes into a note-taking or citation management system? You need to think about how you're going to take notes on all that reading. Are you going to type it? Are you more of a typing person? Or are you more of a handwritten person, right? How do you like to take notes? What makes the material that you're writing down stick in your brain the best? You're also going to think about where you're going to store all of those notes and all of the citational information about those texts, right? Maybe you like paper stuff, analog stuff. Maybe you really like filing cabinets. Filing cabinet is a great system for managing notes and reading. For those of you who like digital stuff, you have a lot more options and increasingly more options day after day, right? You're also going to think about what kind of metadata or coding system you're going to use. All this means is how are you going to organize all of those notes so that you can find something when you need it. Maybe you have a system of tags that would be useful. Maybe you tag notes on specific topics. Maybe you have a color coding system if you're a kind of visual person and you like color coding stuff. Maybe you have a location system. So I'm going to put all my notes about this topic in this folder in this drawer, and I'm going to put all my notes on this other topic in this other physical location, right? You can try out different systems and figure out a coding or metadata system that works for you. I put here some suggestions or some resources, tools for both taking notes as well as organizing your references or citation management options. These aren't by no means the only ones, but they're ones that you might have heard of and you might find useful. Okay. So now that you've read all this stuff, you're going to be continually reading all this stuff. You're taking awesome notes on everything so that you can start to integrate those notes, those ideas later, so they can build to the scholarship that you're actually going to be producing in graduate school. How do you actually turn that into writing? So in addition to reading, one of the things that you're going to be doing a ton of in graduate school is writing. And so it behooves you to create, to develop, to test out, and to kind of perfect a writing routine earlier on rather than waiting till later. One of the big differences between graduate school and undergrad is how you approach writing. Now, maybe you were an undergrad that kind of could pull off assignments the night before, right? Nothing wrong with that. If it got done, if it was quality work, no shame in that. Graduate school, in graduate school, that approach does not work. And that's because the type of writing you're doing in graduate school is scholarly writing, which is not the kind of writing you were doing as an undergrad. The difference here mainly has to do with time and depth and range, which I didn't put on here, but that would also go in there. Scholarly writing takes a lot more time than undergraduate writing. And the reason for that is that you're not just writing in relationship to a single text or a single assignment, and you're not just drawing on what's already in your head. I think this about this, but you're positioning yourself in scholarly conversations that have been going on long before you ever entered them. But scholarship is about positioning yourself and your own arguments in relationship to that broader scholarly community. That requires reading a lot by and about that broader scholarly community. So because reading a lot of stuff is a key part of how scholarly writing gets produced, scholarly writing thus takes a lot more time, right? So it's helpful to you to figure out how to organize your time and figure out a writing routine that'll let you produce that type of scholarly writing that you're doing in graduate school. One easy way to do this is to set aside a daily or a weekly time for writing. The time of the day is less important than the routine aspect of it. Maybe you're a morning person and you really like writing in the morning. Great, perfect. Maybe you really like writing at 2 a.m. That's also a thing, and it's perfectly fine. It's not so much important when you do it, it's that you pick a specific time that you write repeatedly at. Put that weekly or daily time for writing on your calendar and protect it the same way that you would protect any other kind of appointment on your calendar. Another good way to manage the type of writing and the type of reading that you'll be doing in graduate school is to either create or to join existing writing groups. So these might be write-on-site groups, so groups where you and several other people agree to physically meet in a location, maybe a cafe, maybe your grad school office, maybe some other place on or off campus. You all show up with your writing instruments, whether that's laptops or notebooks or whatever it is that you're writing with, and you sit there and you write. You're probably not going to be writing the same things, but you're there together writing. You can also set up exchange groups where you exchange the writing that you're producing on a regular basis. You can also set up editing groups, right? Maybe you and a friend of yours swap and edit each other's work on a regular basis. But getting other people involved in your writing process can be a really great way to manage the huge amount of writing that you're going to be doing in grad school. Okay. This brings me to my point about protecting your most important asset. What is that asset? You might think that it's your brain because you're in academia, you're in graduate school to think really important, fantastic, exciting thoughts, to write stuff about those important, exciting thoughts, and to have those important, exciting thoughts change something about the world, right? And indeed, you'll be doing a lot of that in graduate school. But your most important asset in grad school, indeed, I would argue in any career, is your body. Because your body is the thing that lets you think. And if you don't think about your body, you can't think about the other stuff. You are a body in the world, not a brain on a stick. Academia has a tendency to make people forget this. And so I want to remind you and to encourage you to remind yourself that you are and have a body. This will take active work to remember this at times, but it's really important and it will make your intellectual work better. Indeed, it will make your intellectual work possible at all. So how do you actually protect this most important asset, this thing that lets you do anything in graduate school? Number one, sleep. There's a lot of stuff going on in graduate school. There's a lot of stuff going on in academia. There are events, there are projects, there are publications, there are expectations, There are new relationships, there are conferences to organize and to attend, there are presentations, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And most of it's really fun. Some of it's not so fun, but you get through it. But I want to encourage you to protect your sleep. Now, everyone has different sleep patterns. That's up to you. But make sure you get sleep, because sleep is what will help you think. I mean, remember the last time you didn't get enough sleep and how kind of fuzzy your brain was? You're using your brain intensely in graduate school, right? But that brain needs sleep to function. That brain needs your body to function. So make sure you get enough sleep. Also, make sure to eat real food. Whatever that means to you, the actual, in diet or food or whatever that you're consuming is less important than eating healthy for your particular situation. I'm also going to encourage you to cultivate creative practices. These are any practice that makes your kind of creative self awaken. This is going to be different for you than it is going to be for the next person. That's perfectly fine. But whatever those practices are that make you think, that kind of stir that creative part of yourself. I'm going to encourage you as well to resist turning all of those things into research. This is a super common problem that academics and graduate students in particular have. You get really excited about a practice, and then you start thinking, what if I could write about this? Maybe you start painting for fun, and you're like not very good at it, but it's fun. But then you start to learn a little bit more about it, and you're like, what if I could integrate this into my research in some way? I want to encourage you to resist that urge. Not everything has to be part of your research. And oftentimes having something that you do just for fun, regardless of whether you're already good at it, but just because it sparks your creativity, can be really helpful in graduate school. And finally, cultivate body practices. This is any kind of practice that you use your body in some capacity. It can often be really helpful to have both a practice that calms you down, something that de-stresses you, that lets you recharge. So something like meditation or massage or yoga or whatever it is that you're into, as well as a practice that brings you up or that gives you energy or lets you release energy. So this would be something like exercise or dancing, right? But having those two types of body practices, something that kind of calms you down and then something that brings you up, doing both of those can be really helpful in protecting your most important asset in graduate school, which is your body. Okay. And finally, you've got this. Just a couple of like last minute pieces of advice or words of pearls of wisdom. No, everybody else doesn't have it figured out. Oftentimes graduate students, particularly early year graduate students, people who are early in their graduate schooling time, worry that everyone else has it already figured out and they're just the one weird one who never got the memo. I'm here to tell you that's not true. Everyone is learning. Everyone's figuring it out. Everyone's learning what writing routines and what reading routines and what teaching routines work best for them. You're allowed to stumble along and figure it out. And you're allowed to connect with other people and be vulnerable with other people and ask questions of other people to figure that out with them. Graduate school involves a ton of learning, a ton of testing, experimenting, and growing. You will change dramatically over the course of your years in grad school. That's good. That's normal, right? And that's fun. I will also recommend that you be kind to yourself and to others. Sometimes grad school can be stressful, particularly in times where you feel a bit overwhelmed, and it can be tempting to fall back on defensiveness or pettiness. Try as much as humanly possible to avoid that. Be nice to yourself, be nice to others. Grad school is hard. Everybody chill out. And finally, you don't have to do everything, but also don't hide. You'll learn over time, the longer that you're in your program, the stuff that you have to do for professional reasons and the stuff you can blow off or ignore for self-care reasons. So you'll figure out over time which are the events, the department events you definitely have to go to each week? And which can you ignore? Or which can you only go for a few minutes at the beginning or the end to kind of check in and then head out? And that comes from experimentation, right? So no, you don't have to go to literally everything. There's just too much stuff. But also don't hide. Don't squirrel away in your apartment or in your house and never engage with the campus or the city or the community that you're living in, right? And you figure out that balance over time. Okay. And finally, I told you at the beginning that I give you some information about where you can find more support as you progress through your graduate school career. And one of the places where you can do that, and there are several options, but one of the places you can do that is the Grad School Rockstars community that Ideas on Fire runs. This is a mentorship community for progressive interdisciplinary graduate students. And it's an incredibly supportive kind of mentorship community made up of people from fields like ethnic studies, women and gender studies, transgender studies, disability studies, communication, sociology, anthropology, you name it. In the community, we have weekly office hours with 4 coaches, all of whom are either current or have been professors in these various fields and have a diversity of careers. You also have access to twice monthly live webinars, as well as an extensive video library of events on topics like organizing your dissertation chapters, building self-care routines, building, crafting academic book proposals, and the like. There's also a large number of trainings, activities, worksheets to help you figure out some of the nitty-gritty work of graduate school. And finally, there are both monthly and semester plans. You can figure out what works best for your situation and for your needs in graduate school. I put the web address on there, ideasonfire.net/gradschoolrockstars. You can also ask me any questions about it. I'm one of the coaches, and all 4 of us coaches have really enjoyed watching the huge array of projects in progress that the graduate students in the community have done over the last several years. Has been pretty amazing. So I will stop sharing my screen if I can. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So are there any questions about anything that I've covered? Either practices that you can set up, routines you can set up in your first semester, or kind of how to use that first semester to set yourself up for future success in your future years. You can put the questions in the chat room over here, and I will be sure to answer them. Okay. Doesn't look like folks have questions, which is fine. If you find that you have questions later, something jogs your memory and you go, oh, I wish I had asked Cathy about that. You can always contact us through Ideas on Fire. Those of you who are in the Grad School Rockstars community, you can always talk with us in office hours in our community. And just a heads up for some future webinars coming up. Our next free open to the public webinar is on September 18th. And that we'll be talking about how to work productively with an editor. So whether you are writing a journal article or working on a publication of any sort, working with an editor can be really helpful. So we're going to be talking about how to actually navigate that process. And then another webinar we have coming up in September is on September 26th. And that is focusing on how to use your dissertation to build a non-academic career. So a lot of graduate students are training for careers beyond the academy, as well as many are training for careers within the academy. And so we're going to be talking about how to use your dissertation to train for diverse careers. And oh, I see a question. Okay. So William asks how to choose an advisor. So this will differ a little bit depending on your campus and depending on how your department has this set up. but because sometimes programs set you up with an advisor, so like assign you an advisor in STEM fields, less common in social science and humanities and interdisciplinary fields, where you tend to have a little bit more choice. So take this with a grain of salt, depending on the situation in your actual department. But particularly when you are starting out in grad school, like when you're, before you actually have to nail down an advisor, you have some freedom to get to know different faculty. I'd encourage you to take classes from a wide variety of faculty. I'd encourage you to go to office hours for a wide variety of faculty. Again, you don't need to already know them. You don't need to be in their classes to go to office hours. Office hours are a chance for you to get to know the faculty that you could potentially work with, right? Essentially kind of auditioning them as a potential advisor. So you mentioned that in your department, they assign a temporary advisor that first year, which is helpful because it's at least one person that you know you can go to if you have a concrete question, like, do I have to take this? Or can I take this other one to fulfill this requirement, right? That can be a really helpful thing to ask an advisor and to know who you can ask that question of. You also then, assuming you indicated it's temporary, so implying that you can change that advisor later, right? This is a chance for you to, to figure out the advisors that can give you different things that you need, right? So rather than think about an advisor as the single person who will give you all of the answers that you will ever have to every question you'll ever have in graduate school, think about advisors as different people who can give you different pieces of advice on different topics. So maybe you know a faculty member, or you come to know a faculty member in your department who has really great resources on job applications. Like maybe they just have fantastic advice on cover letters and managing job applications. They'd be a great person to go to with questions about that, right? But maybe they work in a field that's slightly different than yours. In that case, maybe they're not the advisor you go to for suggestions about how to improve your dissertation chapter, right? It doesn't mean that a single person can't necessarily be the only answer, or the only advisor for everything, right? So it's a matter of putting together a team of people, your own kind of personal team of people that can give you advice on the various things that you have questions about. Does that help? Okay. Awesome. Cool. Other questions? Oh, and yes, indeed, that is a Esther Hernandez, a friend of Postgrad. Okay. Well, if you, William, if you find you have other questions, or anyone else watching, if you find you have questions, you can always contact us through Ideas on Fire. And those of you who, as I said, are in our Rockstar community, you know, you can always chat with us in office hours. Thank you so much for attending and for asking questions. I hope this was helpful. As I said, our next webinar is coming up in a couple weeks. It's free, it's open to the public. Feel free to invite whoever you want. We do 2 of these a month, one exclusively for the Rockstar community and one that's open to the public. You can check out the upcoming topics at ideasonfire.net/events and see what events are coming down the pike. Okay, thank you much. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, and I hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye.